Okay, we are officially recording, so I did want everyone to know that, so you could frame your questions accordingly, or this will be available for replay. I'm really excited to introduce our workshop leader for today, Kamini Desai. She's the education director at the Amrit Yoga Institute and the creator of the Amrit method of Yoga Nidra training curriculum. She is the author of Yoga Nidra, The Art of Transformational Sleep. And in 2012, Kamini was awarded the Yogeshwari, a Woman of Yoga Mastery Award title. So welcome, Kamini. I've met you once before. You are a light, and I'm just really grateful to have you here.
Thank you. Feels really good to be here. So tonight, I guess without further ado, we'll just go ahead and jump right in. Jenny and Reba, thanks so much for having me here, and thanks everybody for joining in today, this afternoon. I'm actually in Iceland, so for me it's evening, but for most of you it's afternoon, I believe. And just a little bit about myself. I grew up as the daughter of a yoga master, and a lot of people think, well, then you must have it all made. And even though you might, learn the theory, life is the practice of the theory. And so my attempt and my interest is in bringing the ancient teachings of yoga and share them with all of you, but in a way that's really practical and relevant and usable, where anybody could use it and kind of go, I get that. And so that's what we're going to do tonight with understanding the yoga of relationships. And so we're going to start with the yoga part, and then we'll see how that hooks into the relationships part. And in my mind, we're all in relationships, whether you're in a love romantic relationship or not. We all have to relate with other people all the time. So that means it's a really good way to practice self-awareness. It's a really good spiritual practice. It's probably one of the most powerful places that we can practice. So tonight I hope to introduce to you kind of a map to understand how we can understand energy or relationships in terms of energy patterns. And once you get the hang of this, it's sort of like a language. When you leave this workshop, you'll kind of be able to go, oh my God, I need to be more Pingala, or I need to be more Yang, or that was too Ida. So that may make no sense to you now, but by the end of this workshop, it will make sense to you. And also we will be finishing the end of this workshop with a guided Yoga Nidra. So if you do have a place where you can lie down, maybe just behind your chair there, I don't need to see you, but I will be guiding you in a Nidra at the end. And of course, you're welcome to also just sit down as well. So anyway, so let's just jump right in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen with you, and hopefully this will work. And what I'm going to bring up is the handouts and see if this works. Yes, I think it did. Okay, does everybody see the handouts there?
Now.
Yes, okay, perfect. All right, so on the first page, and you have this as well, but you feel free to just follow along with me. So I really like to work in pictures. Those of you who know me, you know this. So what you're looking at is actually the ocean down here, and these are waves. And you could think of the source, and we all have different names for the source, but think of the source as the source, as the depths of the ocean. It's undifferentiated potential. It is infinite potential, but it has taken no form, just like the depths of an ocean. But then when that ocean, that infinite potential comes into waves, it can take many different forms. So the source in itself is undifferentiated. It has no quality of its own, but it can take on many different qualities in the world of form. So for example, think of, the same ocean can take the form of many, many different waves, big waves, small waves, spray waves, little waves, all different kinds of waves, but it's the same ocean. And the same is true, yogis would say, of all of existence, that everything comes out of one source into a multiplicity of forms. And all these forms are aspects of one source, right? And so when things come into the world that we see, in the world of form, even though they appear to be individual waves, like we have individual bodies, there are houses, there are trees, there are lamps, there are animals, these are all individual waves. But yogis would say that these are all composed of one thing, which is energy, or prana. Okay? And this prana, or this source energy, is really this source made visible. Okay, so keep that in mind. Source made visible. Everything is energy, just like what Einstein said. And this energy is really the source made visible. Right? So the next thing that yogis talk about is that everything in manifest existence, in the world of form, not only is composed of energy, but it all arises in what we call polarity, or complementary opposites, right? So think of this as like the zero place. This is why it's like a zero. And then when things come into form, there is the zero, or the source, but from that source, on the polarity level, things arise in a yin and a yang, or complementary opposites. So in the world of form, things arise in apparent opposites that together make one whole. So think of dark and light, right? So you got your yin and your yang, your dark and your light. You have night and day. You have tension and relaxation. You have sunrise and sunset, or the biggest polarity in life, of course, is life and death, right? So all of these are complementary opposites. An up and a down, or a pain and a pleasure. They all seem to be opposites, but actually together they make one complementary whole. And really, you can't have one without the other. You can't have a down without an up. You can't have a bottom. The crest of a wave, for example, is determined by the depth of the wave. So the low actually determines the high, or the pain actually kind of informs and determines what the pleasure is. So yogis would say that everything arises in these opposites, masculine and feminine energies. Everything arises in these complementary opposites. And together they make one whole. So you could, for example, breath in and breath out. You can't just breathe in all the time. It has to be breath in and breath out, and the two together create one complementary whole. So I think hopefully you have a sense of that, which now takes us to duality, right? And duality is something that's created in the mind, and our mind is capable of taking this natural polarity of things and dividing it into one versus the other. So an example would be pain versus pleasure, right? So we know that in order to keep our body alive, we need to experience both pleasure and pain, and that both of these inform, well, I feel the pain of hunger, so I eat, and then I feel pleasure, and the two together keep me alive. Or I feel the pain of an injury, and when it's healed, I feel better, and the two together keep me alive. So really, pain and pleasure serve one function, which is your human life. But the mind can divide these two. So pain is against pleasure, right? So in our mind, it can appear that one half of polarity is actually in conflict with or against the other. And this creates a situation where where down appears to be the enemy of up. Anybody ever felt that? Where it feels like, oh my God, this relationship is going terribly. That's the enemy of the good stuff. And so this is what we do at the level of the mind, where we create conflict with the natural polarity of life. And it throws us off. And once in terms of relationship, you can see this. If you understand that everything arises in polarity, you can be more relaxed with the up and the down, right? A lot of us, especially in Western society, we think, especially because of fairy tales and romance, movies, that it's supposed to be up and up and up and up forever. And we think that if we hit the down, well, there's something wrong. And yoga would say, first and foremost, that actually that's just a natural part of the waves of a relationship, that there's nothing wrong with the down parts, that actually they are a natural balancing aspect of being in relationship. And there's nothing really to be scared of, but it is something to be learned from and used. Right? So keeping this in mind, that's how we're going to go into the rest of this workshop, is really understanding that what you may perceive as down in a relationship can actually be the thing that is where you have the most possibility for your self-awareness, the most possibility to learn. Most of us don't learn when things, I'm sorry to say this, but we don't learn when things are joyful and great and fabulous. That's like sitting in a hot tub, right? We learn when things are hard, when things are tough. That's when we start looking at our stuff and really wanting to learn, because we're like, wait a minute, this isn't working, and we're willing to pay attention. So the same is true in relationship, that don't take the down as something bad, but take it as an opportunity to grow and to learn about yourself and about each other. So what I wanted to start with was a little bit of an understanding about how we move from polarity into duality in relationships, right? So for this, I'm going to have you close your eyes for just a moment. And I hope that those of you listening are body people, because I'm going to have you just visualize something. And what I want you to visualize is that you're standing face to face with somebody, maybe it's someone close in your life, and that you're clasping wrist to wrist, so that when you progressively lean away from each other, you find a balance point where the two of you are in a kind of perfect harmony and balance with each other. And it's kind of effortless to be in that place. You don't feel like it's hard to be there. There's just this effortless balancing. And this is what I'm going to call polarity in a relationship. And this polarity happens, and you can kind of feel that we all are in polarity relationships, meaning in different aspects, we hold different parts of the relationship for each other. Like in some relationships, we're the one who's really easygoing and we help the other person relax. And maybe in other relationships, we're the motivator, we're the inspirer. So most often when you get into relating with other people, whether it's your kids, whether it's a colleague, whether it's a love relationship, doesn't really matter. There's going to be this complementary polarity where one of you holds one side or one pole and the other holds the other. And when the two of you are in balance, it feels like the relationship is effortless. It feels like it's in flow, and it's really, really easy. Yeah, it's effortless. So that we would call polarity, because you are in complementary polarity with whoever it is that you're in interaction with. But what can also happen is, especially when we get stressed or when we get constricted or tired or overworked, is we move from polarity to duality. And what happens is, let's say in the polarity, we're leaning away from each other, we're in this perfect balance with each other, and we look over at the other and we can appreciate that the other is maybe the receptive person. And we look at them and we say, wow, how great is it that you help me stay relaxed and remember that, work isn't everything, and how wonderful you are to just help me enjoy life. And maybe the receptive person looks over at their polar opposite, the active, the polar energy, and go, wow, and you help inspire me and motivate me, and you help me get going and get things done, and how wonderful is that? So that's the effortless polarity. But when we get tense, we move into this duality. And instead of being able to appreciate the complementary opposite that the other person brings, we go into a duality relationship where the apparent complementary opposites move into conflict. So, for example, the active energy looks over at the receptive energy, and instead of perceiving the receptive person as, relaxed and helpful and helping me take it easy, they just look plain old lazy. And the receptive person looks over at the person who's active and says, well, you don't look, I don't appreciate you anymore. I don't even remember that. All I remember is now you appear to be bossy. And so what started as appreciating this perfect balance, the active and the receptive energy together creating this one whole, what starts to happen is, active looks over to receptive and says, well, if you just, did your part of the job, everything would be fine. Okay? And the lazy looks over to the active and says, well, if you just chilled every once in a while, everything would be okay. And so what happens is, instead of the wholeness being created by each of the two holding one piece of the pole, we try to create wholeness by pulling the other person over to be like me. So the active says to the receptive, well, if you were just more like me, everything would be okay. And the receptive looks over to the active and says, well, if you were just more like me, and if you would just take a chill pill every once in a while, well, everything would be okay. And so instead of this beautiful, harmonious balance, what we get into is a power struggle. We start pulling on each other, trying to get the other person to be just like us. Right? And this is where this natural polarity moves into what I call duality. Right? So I'm just going to take a break there and see if this makes sense so far to you. And see if anybody sees where this is relating, or if you have any questions so far. Let's see. So how are we doing? All right. I can't hear anything for some reason, so I'm going to assume everybody's okay.
Yeah, if anyone has a question, they can raise their hand or chat or type into the chat box, so Kamini knows that you have a question. It's going well on this end, Kamini. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. So Jenny, just before you go back, oh, I see what we're doing. Okay, gotcha. So I guess you all got to see pictures of me and my kids. Sorry about that. All right, so everybody okay so far? Everything making sense so far? Okay, all right, excellent. So this is what we want to look at is, and I'm sure we all understand this, because you see, a relationship, or when you first start working together and you're like, wow, I so appreciate this person for what they bring. And then at some point, the very thing that we appreciated about that person becomes the thing that becomes the most irritating, right? And notice that it happens most when we are stressed, right? Most when we are tired. It's almost like instead of being able to see the totality, we only start seeing from our one side. So instead of me seeing, oh, wow, I see the whole picture and how we relate together, it's more like I look from my perspective and I look over at you who's leaning away from me, you who's different from me, you who's not doing how I would do it, right? And only if you did it my way, it would all be fine. And this is where we get into that constriction. And so later this evening, at the end, I'm going to guide you through a yoga nidra. And this is one of the best ways to begin to deconstruct our perspective, so that instead of looking from my perspective, you need to be like me or you need to be like me, I can begin to return back to that relaxed perspective where I see the whole picture again. And I go, oh yeah, this is what I appreciate about this person. Oh yeah, that's what they do. And oh yeah, this is where I fit in. And no, I don't need them to be like me. I can appreciate them for who they are. But that happens less through the mind. It happens somewhat through the mind, but more through just relaxing. And when we relax, our vision and our perspective gets wider again. And we can again receive the person as they are. Another thing to do, though, I will say at the level of the mind, especially if you have like a colleague or somebody who just drives you crazy, is to ask yourself, how is this person trying to add to the whole? Because most of the time, the perspective that another person takes or the way of being that they take is that they are trying to balance out. Energy always seeks balance. So if I'm all the way on one side, very often I will attract people who hold the other point of view. So what I can look at is what view that they're trying to bring, something that I haven't heard, that I haven't seen, something that I don't want to see, that's adding to the whole, that will help me understand them and at least be maybe a little bit less irritated with them. So that's the first piece that I wanted to go over. The second piece that I'd like to talk about is balance, right? And one of the things that I just referred to is that energy always seeks balance. So if in your mind, and those of us who have dated know this, so I'm assuming that's most of us. Have you ever noticed that the more you move towards somebody, especially when you're very enthusiastic, the more they pull away from you? Anybody notice that? Right? So imagine that I'm standing face to face with somebody, and if I move into their space like this, the tendency is for them to move back, right? And this is because energy will always seek balance. So if I'm pushing into a space, generally speaking, not always, the other person will tend to pull back, right? And vice versa. If I pull back, the other person will tend to move into the space. So the interesting thing about this is if we understand this principle, energy seeks balance, you can see that if I'm having large swings within myself, so if I'm swinging one way and then the other way and then the other way and the other way, what am I going to tend to create around me with my close relationships? Well, if I swing this way, they're going to go this way. If I swing this way, they're going to go that way. So the more that I have extremes in my own energy, the way that I am, I'm going to tend to create extremes around me. And so then that begs the next question, what if I were to be balanced within myself? What if I were to be balanced in my own inner energy? So that if it's true that the more I swing, the more the other person swings, what if I'm more or less still? Doesn't that also help create the right environment for the other person to be balanced? Right? Now, this is not a fairy tale. I'm not guaranteeing that if you're centered, your partner is going to be centered. But I am saying that the more balanced and centered that you are, the more you're going to tend to help create the same thing in your partner. Right? And so that's what I want to look at. I want to look at, well, how do I create that inner balance? And this question really came for me because I'm sure you have all heard people say, well, you know, you have to be whole in yourself. You have to be centered in yourself before you can be in a relationship. And that sounds really good. But I've been investigating for myself, well, what does that really mean? What does being energetically balanced in yourself really mean? And so that's the next piece that we're going to before we go on there, that a relationship really, it's not that you're ever going to be like steady, balanced, and still in yourself. It's more that you're able to flow in a relationship back and forth, kind of like a dance, but not in extremes. All right. So just be aware that I'm not saying that you are going to be steady and still in your center all the time. It's more that you're able to kind of flow within a subtle range of being rather than going to the extreme. Right. Okay, so there's just, if you are not muted, go ahead and put your mute button on. I think everybody, yeah, there you go. If you can mute yours, that would be great, right? Okay, so we're gonna go back to share screen. And let's see if I can find this again. Pull this up. And let's see, hold on one second, guys. I think I did this. All right. Okay. All right. Everybody's seeing this, I hope. Okay, excellent. All right, so let's go back here for a moment, a little bit more about energy. So we've understood everything at this level is composed of energy, just like Einstein said, everything is energy. And we understand that everything at this level arises in polarity, okay, including our body. Everything is the masculine and feminine, a beginning and an end, a light and a dark, and our body also contains within it polar energies, right? So our body is actually infused with the energy of the source. Everything is infused with the energy of this source, including our bodies. And when this energy comes into our body, it manifests in polarity. You guessed it, all right? So this is a picture of the energy system of the body. I'm guessing that a lot of you have seen something like this. These are the chakras, more or less. And what you're looking at is basically the polar or the energy system of your body, the way that source energy comes into you, right? And remember we said this energy is really the source made visible, right? So this energy is source made visible. It manifests into three major poles, or two major poles and then the one central pole. So let's look at these poles. We have the masculine pole. So each of us has a masculine energy within us. This energy begins, okay, let me not get confused, with the right nostril, the left brain. So the Pingala Nadi, it's called a nadi, or a nerve current, a nerve channel, goes from the left brain through the right nostril and then travels down the body like this all the way to the base of your spine, okay? And the Pingala pole, or the masculine pole within you, is related to the left brain, but the right nostril is, because it crosses, right? It relates to the sun energy. It's the heating, doing, active energy. It's your will to make things happen. It's your masculine energy. It's the positive pole, all right? So if you were to imagine this energy system in your body like a battery has two poles, right? And because these two poles are in balance, the battery operates. And the same is true of the battery system, or the energy system of your body. This is also related to yang. Another name for Pingala would be yang. And interestingly enough, another name for Pingala is ha. Okay, so we're going to come back to that. And then on the other side, we also have another pole. It's the negative pole, the other side of the battery. This is your feminine energy, and this is related to your right brain, your left nostril, and it also comes down, kind of curving down from the third eye all the way down to the base of your spine, right? And this is the moon energy. And it's cooling. This is heating and this is cooling. It's more surrendered and receptive. It's your feminine energy. It's the negative pole, not negative as in bad, but the negative side of the pole. It's also called yin, and it's called ta, right? So before I get to the obvious, this ha and this ta, let's look at this for a moment. Yogi said that when you are in a state of balance, when you are in a state of health, your Pingala and Ida are in balance. And when these two are in balance, then what happens is that the third and central channel, the Sushumna, opens, and that the wave that you are, you come into a state of polarity, right? You come into a state of balance of your yin and your yang. And when this yin and yang are balanced, the third channel opens up and you become connected to the formless source. You become connected to unity, or the source that you are. So this third channel called the Sushumna, so here's the source up here actually in this picture. And here's the Sushumna, and the Sushumna only opens when Pingala and Ida are in balance. And it's only then that you come into, let's say, the balance point brings you into a state of unity, right? Yogi said these two are balanced, you experience health, but you also experience a connection to your true nature, to your true source, right? And the practice of being balanced between Pingala and Ida, the practice of being whole energetically, is called Hatha Yoga, right? So we've all been hearing about Hatha Yoga. I think a lot of you have probably heard about Hatha Yoga, and we think of it as just external poses, right? As external physical poses, but actually the purpose and the meaning of Hatha Yoga, these poses were designed to externally create balance between your Pingala and Ida, or your inner masculine and feminine, right? And I'm suggesting that we not only can practice Hatha Yoga outside by doing yoga poses, we can also practice Hatha Yoga inside by balancing our inner masculine and feminine energies. And in doing so, we become a whole person. We become a centered person. We become that person who is grounded and centered in themselves, rather than kind of going one way and the other way and the other way and the other way. This is what it means to be a whole person, to have a balanced Ida and Pingala. And when you are a whole person, embodied as a whole person in your inner masculine and feminine, not only are you whole on this plane, you're also connected to the source, right? So you're not only fully embodied, you're also connected to that which is beyond embodiment. So how are we doing so far? Any questions before I move to the next part? Okay, all right, I'm going to assume we're okay. So the next part I want to look at, and so what I'm going to look at now is patterns that we have, right? So we all have, whether we're aware of it or not, patterns or places that we go to, like safe places that we've learned to have in certain areas a Pingala pattern, and in certain areas we have an Ida pattern, right? No one is all one or all the other, but you'll notice, and I'll go through this, you'll see that in certain places we consistently do one and feel that we're unable to do the other. And this tends to create imbalances within us. And so we want to look at that and understand that so that we can create more of this internal wholeness that we're talking about. So let's look at the next page. And before I go here, I just want to say that I'm going to be talking about excesses of Pingala and Ida, and not to take it personally or feel bad. I'm not intending to insult anyone, but I am intending to be a little humorous. So you have to take yourself lightly if you see yourself in here, or if you see somebody you know and love in here. This is partly to make the point, but partly also truth, all right? So let's start on the excess Ida side, right? So the Ida side is the feminine side. This is the right brain and the left nostril. And And each person will tend, instead of finding wholeness through their opposite, their complementary opposite, we often try to find wholeness in our way of being, all right? So an Ida person, a person who relies on their receptive energy, will seek love through merging, will seek approval through merging. In other words, I give up who I am. I have no sense of my own self except for what you think about me, what you say about me, and I give up all my needs, all my wants, so that for you, in the hopes that you will love me so much that we will merge, right? But you can kind of see that there's a loss of self there. There's a loss of a feeling of an individuality, because I lose myself in the whole. Right? You might see this in your if you have kids, you might have seen this in their teenage years, or if you remember yourself as a teenager, how there was at least a time where when we fell in love, we lost who we were. You know, we cut our hair the way they liked it. We colored our hair. We did all kinds of things. We submerged our whole personality just to be like the other person, right? This is a little bit of the Ida side. So the Ida person, and remember, it's not a person. We tend to do this in certain situations. So sometimes you'll be Ida, sometimes you'll be Pingala, but listen for yourself here, all right? In Ida situations, you might tend to choose others over yourself, right? So you're giving, 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 but not just giving, it's to your own detriment. Because for an Ida person, I don't matter. It's all about giving so much in the submersion of the self, right? So we can give so much that we give to the point of burnout, which I'm sure nobody listening recognizes, where we have nothing left, right? And part of that comes because we have difficulty with our own boundaries. Because all my love is coming from the other and what the other says about me, and I push down and suppress my own needs, it's not okay to say no. Saying no is a potential to take away the love that I'm looking for, right? So we have a lot of difficulties with boundaries and saying no. And so we suppress our own voice, we suppress our own needs, and we avoid conflict, because conflict might mean you don't approve and I don't get the love that I'm looking for through you, all right? Along with that, I'm just going to mention that it's not that we don't say that an excessive Ida won't say what they feel. They just let it be known in passive-aggressive ways, all right? So we let it be, if I'm in an Ida tendency, I'm going to let it be known that I'm unhappy, but I'm not just going to be able to come out and say it. A Pingala would be able to say, I'm unhappy. This is not working for me, people. This is what I need. And Ida they will send the vibe. But if you ask them what's wrong, they'll be, oh, no, nothing's wrong. I'm fine. But you know something's wrong, okay? But they're not able to voice it because their whole strategy for love is about not speaking up and avoiding that conflict, right? So when we're excessively on the Ida side, we're very dependent on the other. We're very dependent on what others think, on how they define who I am, on what they give me. But on the other side, Idas are very good at attending to everybody else's needs, right? They're all about making sure that everybody else feels good, everybody else feels taken care of. They're very strong on their intuition, on their feeling, making sure that everyone's taken care of and feeling good, even to their own detriment, right? And when an excess Ida, when we're in an excess Ida pattern, one of the signs of that is that we will turn, instead of blaming somebody else or getting angry at somebody else, we implode it. We turn it inside in ourselves, and we blame ourselves. Or we push down that anger and it becomes an implosion rather than an explosion. You'll see when we get to Pingala, a Pingala will be more an exploding type of personality, or they'll show their anger in that way and they're not afraid to show it. whereas an Ida will tend to swallow it and push it down, and it can show up in health problems as well. All right. So let's now look at the excess Pingala, and you'll see as you see this that sometimes you're an Ida and sometimes you're a Pingala, and you'll probably start to see patterns where some of it in certain situations, like let's say at work, maybe you're more of a Pingala, but maybe with a certain person you go more Ida. And so what we want to look at is the places where there's a pattern that you can't seem to get out of that's not working. Right? So if it's working for you, don't worry about that. But what we're looking for is, oh my God, I always get stuck in excess Ida with my boss, always looking for their approval and not able to set my boundaries, for example, right? Or respectfully disagree. So now let's look at the excess Pingala. The excess Pingala seeks love through their own strategy, right? And a Pingala is more about hierarchy, right? So their way of loving and seeing love is through authority, meaning I'm the boss. If you're on my train, you're going to do what I say. And if you're not with me doing what I say and how I say it, well, then you're against me, right? And even before, you might know a person who's like this. It's all about the rules and the structure, and it's kind of like my way or the highway. You know, either you're in or you're out. And they don't do well with you saying, well, your suggestions or, you wanting to have a say. No, it's, they say and you do, you follow. So it's more of a hierarchical relationship, and you'll see this pattern also in organizations, right? So there are organizations that are more Pingala. They are more hierarchically set up where we tell you what to do and you do it. Right. Then there are organizations that are very Ida, which is like, let's get everybody's input, and let's talk about it, and let's talk about our feelings, and let's share, which is great. But without the Pingala to make a decision, nothing's going to happen, right? However, a Pingala might, just make a decision, but gets no input from anybody, right? So it's not that one is right or wrong, but you could see how a whole organization is one that takes in all the ideas and talks about it and shares, but then makes a decision and moves forward. That's a whole organization. That's a balance of Ida and Pingala, and that's what we want for ourselves individually as well. So hopefully you can think of somebody who who's a Pingala to have in your mind, and maybe you yourself are a Pingala. And I'm going to say something here, is that you may be one disguised as another, okay? And so listen to this. I'll just out myself for a moment. And for years, I grew up in a culture where I thought I had to be an Ida. I had to be sweet and nice and kind and not have any boundaries and never say no and always be nice, Kamini. But I found out that I'm actually a Pingala underneath, right? And so as you listen to this, that might be a little clue for you as well, all right? So while Idas are all about taking care of everybody else, Pingalas are very good at taking care of themselves. They know what they need, and they're not afraid to say it, to the degree that they can appear selfish to an Ida person, right? Because if an Ida person is all about taking care of somebody else, and a Pingala person comes home from dinner, and the Ida person says, I cooked for 4 hours for you, and the Pingala person says, yeah, but I need to go take my bike ride. Sorry, you're going to have to wait. The Ida is going to look over at the Pingala and say, oh my God, how selfish can you be, right? So what I'm saying is that the Ida person can learn a little bit from the Pingala in the sense that they're taking care of themselves, right? The Pingala person can learn to be a little bit more Ida in terms of like thinking about the other person. So again, neither one is right or wrong, but the whole person happens in that perfect sweet spot between the two. The next one is on the Pingala side is protective, right? And so this is a wonderful quality that we can be protective, that we care for the other. And this can be, it's not that men are Pingala and women are Ida. It doesn't work that way because there are many Ida women, by the way. And it shows up for us as protecting, of taking charge, of being the one who's always, organized and has everything together and that kind of thing. Or it can be, the stereotypical, this is not always the case, but in a stereotype, it could be like a man who's like, okay, well, you don't know how to take care of us, so let me protect you and show you how it's done right? So it can move from a protecting place, but it moves along a spectrum towards controlling, where, let's say, it's not just, well, you could, let me take care of this for you, to you should actually do it this way. And then, well, how come you don't want to do it that way? Well, shouldn't you do it that way? And then suddenly there comes a whole lot of pressure to do it a particular way. And before you know it, you've moved from helping and protecting and organizing into the controlling arena. So, for example, it's interesting because remember how we talked about that Ida Pingala thing, or the extremes? So what you'll often see, for example, is, let's say that you have a woman who's in the Pingala role, and she's kind of taking charge and taking over, and maybe it's like, maybe the partner, could be a man or a woman, is holding back a little bit, right? And so she is saying, well, somebody has to take charge, somebody has to be the adult, somebody has to take care of all this. And the more she moves in to take over, the more the other one pulls back, right? And they pull back and they pull back and they pull back. And suddenly you might find yourself as the Pingala person in a relationship where you've controlled so much and the other person has withdrawn so much, they've kind of silently exited the relationship. Even though they may still be there in physical body form, they've left, because we may have taken over so much, right? And so what do we want to do? We need to move back towards the Ida side, right? To give them space to say what they want and what they need and how they do it, not just how we want them to do it, right? The Pingala person tends to be more comfortable with conflict. Now remember, most of our personalities are made up of combinations of these. So it's rarely one or the other, but the Pingala person, like, I'm not comfortable with conflict, even though I'm a Pingala person. But they are more logic and reason based, right? And so if a straight on Pingala person, somebody comes in crying, the logic and reason person is going to be like, well, tell me the reason. Explain it to me. Give me A, B, and C. Tell me what to do, right? They want to get to like the performance and the outcome and why is this happening, and let's figure it out, right? Whereas the Ida person in the presence of feelings might just say, oh, just cry it out. Just let it be. Doesn't matter. I get it. And they might even cry with you, right? So the Pingala person is going to want to understand. They're logic and reason based. But you can see, again, if you bring these two together, how a person who's totally stuck in logic and reason and isn't able to make sure that everybody feels good and to talk to everybody and take in the intuition and get that softer side of things, that's not the complete picture, right? Or a person who's stuck all in emotion on the Ida side but isn't able to pull themselves together to have logic and reason and actually move forward, that's not all of it either. A Pingala person is going to be all about performance and outcome, right? So, okay, do it, get it done. They're going to tend to want to skip over the whole feel good thing. It's just like, okay, just do it. Right? Whereas the Ida is going to make sure everybody felt good along the way. A Pingala, I talked about an Ida that they turn blame and anger inward. If an Ida is challenged, they will tend to go, if you ask an Ida, well, are you going right? Will probably, well, am I going right? Right? A Pingala will be like, well, of course I'm going the right way. Of course, I know what I'm doing. Don't you think I know what I'm doing? So they will tend to get more aggressive than challenged and defend and push back. The blame and the anger will tend to turn outward rather than inward on themselves. Right? So keep in mind that most of us are combinations of these. But what we want to do in any particular situation is, for example, let's say that I notice that I'm going on the protective controlling side, I know I need to bring in a little bit of this opposite, right? Of just allowing the other to be as they are, right? Or if I'm in the avoiding conflict side, maybe I need to speak up and set a boundary, right? So it's not about an entire personality that's on the right or the left side of the page, but just pieces, and let it piece move toward the center, not the extreme of, well, I'm not going to feel anything, I'm just going to be logic and reason based, but the nice balance between the two. So what I'd like to do is just for you to take a moment. We're just going to take a minute, and I'd like you to kind of think through in your own mind, or take a couple notes on how you see this playing out for you. So if you were going to take pieces of this and say, well, here I'm going to eat from a Pingala, do a little checklist for yourself and see where this fits for you. Right? So just take a minute to do that. And also, if you have questions, this is the time to type your questions in the chat box. Okay, so hopefully you've had a chance to see a little bit of yourself here. And one of the things that Reba asked me to talk about is to address how much of this is nature and how much of this is nurture, right? And I think it's really a combination of both. For example, as I look at the Ida Pingala chart, you can see how different cultures reward different things, right? So, for example, an Ida man in Western society, at least up until now, has not been necessarily gotten, the big approval and reward. Hasn't necessarily gotten the big approval. So I think there is a part of it that is social, that we've learned ways to get the love and the approval and just to succeed in society. We learn, okay, as a man, if I'm sensitive and if I show my feelings, or if I show that I even care about other people, or if I'm not aggressive, then I'm not a man, right? To be a man is to be aggressive and to be defensive. And for women, it's, to be in charge and to be smart, to be logic and reason-based and performance-based. Well, that's not okay. I've got to be soft and sweet and, wear pretty dresses and be feminine. And, I'm overstating it, but you know what I'm talking about. Then, well, that's the done thing. So I think that that's why I said, I think that for many years I thought I was Nita, but actually I'm in large part a Pingala, right? And we're all a mix. It was funny because, just a quick aside, I was teaching a workshop in India, and one of the guys in the workshop said, do you think that, men are mostly Pingala and women are mostly Ida? And I said there were also Indian women there, and I said, so Indian women, what do you think? And they were like, no. So the interesting thing is, speaking to that, the interesting thing in India is that, women actually are often very Pingala, but they've learned how to work within an Ida society, right? So you learn how to do and say the right things, but still there's this Pingala part underneath it. So that's the nurture part. But then there's also the nature part. And I kind of think of it, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Ayurveda. It's a sister science of yoga, and it's the health aspect, basically, of yoga. And in it, they talk about 3 major qualities that come in various mixes to create the personality and the body type that we have. And I kind of see this fitting into that as well, that along with the body type we have, fiery or watery, or a common or airy, I think these also combine to create our mind, our mental state, our emotions, our nature, our consciousness. So I think it's really a combination of the 2. Any other questions on that? Feel free to unmute or just put it in the box, in the chat box.
I'm gonna unmute because it was.
Yes.
I'm kind of interested. This kind of goes along with what you were just saying about in a certain culture, you can be pushed to one extreme or another, or to one tendency or another, or at least to manifest that way, or to appear that way, or to operate that way of necessity. As energy, as you explain it, you get pushed, you're meeting the need, the vacuum, whatever. And that can be true in a family, in a system, whether that's a family or an organization, and you did allude to that too, that or systems, organizations can operate in this pattern, but also they can push you to operate. So so I was just kind of testing myself as you asked me to, and what I noticed was that professionally I appear very Pingala, and I think that's how people perceive me first and foremost, and yet I am a closet Ida.
Yeah.
And then they're very surprised. Oh, my feelings were hurt. Oh, I need nurture. What?
Yeah.
Big, bad, powerful Laura. So, but at the same time, I see how in my family, with a totally different system, I'm excessively Ida, and I allow, the big Pingalas to steamroll over me.
Yeah.
So it really depends. My tendency really depends on your context very much.
Exactly. You nailed it, Laura. That's exactly it. So, and it's not even really wrong. It's just to understand. It just gives you a language to understand it. And then what's helpful is that if there's something that's not working about it, to go, okay, that's interesting. In families, and it's part of the reason we do this is because we're balancing the energy of the group. So for example, maybe at your work, 1, that's expected of you. 2, maybe you have a lot of Ida around you and you just have to pull things together and get things done. So you have to be that way. It's your job description, those kinds of things. And so that's how you balance the energy around you. Maybe in the family system, maybe there are a lot of Pingalas around, and so to help balance the energy, you go Ida, right? And go ahead.
So this is very helpful heuristic device. I mean, it's, once you've got a framework and it helps you recognize what's going on, is the ultimate object then, once you recognize it, to try and avoid the excesses and come into a closer balance yourself in order to bring others there? And is it something that you recommend, doing overtly, that, whether talking about it, or is it something that happens naturally, energetically, as you relax into a place of center?
I think that's a really, really good question. Thank you. So let's go to the first bit, which is, I think that whatever you do, you just want it to be conscious. Because right now, a lot of what we do is largely unconscious. We don't even know what we're doing or why we're doing it. So it may be, for example, at family functions, that you're just better off for everybody. Maybe you choose to be Ida, but at least you're consciously choosing it rather than it being consciously chosen you as a pattern. And that can mean, so if it's working for you and you think, you might say, well, that's not really me, but for the well-being of everybody, this is where I'm going to choose to be. That could be one way. Or once it's conscious for you, you could say, you know what, this isn't working for me and it's not working for anybody else. I'm going to consciously shift this. So you could choose to shift it towards the middle, exactly as you said, or you might consciously choose not to because that's what's called for in a moment. Maybe you're, to dinner with your in-laws and they're very Pingala and you're just like, you know what, I'm just going to go eat it right now and keep my mouth shut. And that could be a conscious choice as long as it's your choice. That's the thing, right? And then there was something else you said. Oh, do I need to consciously say it to them? I think sometimes, especially with people who you trust, it's a nice place to practice to say to them, I'm practicing going a little more Pingala, and to say my needs, to speak up my needs. Because here's the thing, we haven't gotten here yet, is that you may go to the opposite extreme, right? So if you've always been an Ida in a particular situation and you're like, okay, now I'm going to try to be Pingala, you're like a bull in a china shop and you may like overshoot the mark and then some. So it's helpful to practice with people who love you, who you love, and to tell them ahead of time, I'm practicing this, so that, first they can tell us if they can just go, ouch, tell me if that was too much. And so you'll start to learn the language that's more in the middle, right? And just know that part of coming back to center is going to the extreme. Right? We can't, it's almost like an undiscovered part of ourselves, at least in a particular situation or environment. So we kind of, it's like a teenager who has to go to the extreme sometimes to find the middle. So I do recommend, at least with close people around you who you trust, to actually verbalize it and say that you're practicing. And then like your colleagues, I wouldn't tell them necessarily, unless you trust them. But you could, for example, say something like, I just want to practice saying what I mean and meaning what I say, or something like that. You could say it in a way that's not too gushy, but just to say, this is something I'm experimenting with, So does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much. That was
okay.
Good.
Great question. Anyone else? Okay, so please jump in, and otherwise I'm going to keep going. This is one little thing I want to show you. So I think you've all got the principle. I can feel that you've all got it. So often we will see what our pattern is by the way that the people around us are behaving. Okay, so we can't see what we're doing, but we can see what the people around us are doing. So, for example, imagine that this is two people in a relationship, and you're leaning on each other, and together, by leaning on each other, you create the structure of your relationship. And this is in balance. But let's say you're an Ida person, and as an Ida person, you lean in, and you lean in, and you lean in. And the more of your body weight, imagine this is a body that presses in. Can you see what this other person has to do? They have to push back in order to maintain the integrity of the relationship, right? So what we might see is that if we're very dependent on the other person, seeking approval from them, asking them, what should I do? What should I say? How should I be? How do I tie my shoes? How do I pay my bills? The more we become dependent on them, the more they feel pushed on, and the more they start to push back. They try to hold the line by trying to hold you up. And so what it appears like to this Ida person who's leaning on on this person is like, wow, that person is so Pingala. They're taking charge of everything. They're taking control of everything, right? but actually it could be coming out of my way of being where I'm relying on them so heavily that they feel the weight of me, and all they're trying to do is just push it all back up, right? And maybe we've been on the other side of those relationships where we felt that like, whoa, and you're just like, okay, I'm just gonna, try to even things out a little bit. So if you're seeing that you're in a relationship where the other person is really bossy and controlling and kind of taking over everything, you might ask yourself if you're being too Ida, right? If you're relying on them too heavily, if you're seeking their approval too much, if you've given away so much to them that they almost feel like they have to hold you up, right? And in that case, what it may be that you need to do is get your feet more underneath you and stop looking to them so much for approval, right? So that's if you're the Ida in the relationship. If you're the person who feels like, oh my God, I'm being squished, I've got so much pressure from this other person on me, this is the interesting thing. Instead of being Pingala and trying to be there to take over, you might need to step back and give them some more space, okay? And here's what I mean. If you're always paying their bills and telling them what to do and calling the health insurance company or whatever it is for them, they're going to continue to lean on you. But if you step back a little bit, I mean, don't let them fall flat on their face, but step back a little bit and let them take some of that responsibility, it's going to help balance out things a little bit, right? So if you're in a relationship where you feel all the pressures on you, you might want to experiment with just stepping back a little bit so that they have to take some of that stuff back on them and help even out the relationship, right? And then on the other side, let's say that you are seeing that the people around you are kind of passive aggressive and not speaking up and kind of resistant to you but not saying anything, or they're just withdrawing. They just say yes and then go away. And you're like, what happened to that person, right? You might ask yourself if you're being too Pingala, right? So if you are like, well, what about this and what about that? And you need to do this and you need to do that. At some point, it's almost like I'm pulling on you. And the more I'm pulling on this other person, all they can do to keep their footing is to pull back away from me. So I'm pulling on you and that person is pulling back. They're trying to go this way. I'm not sure if you can get the visual of that, but the more I pull on you, the more the other person tries to pull back just to hold some sense of themselves. And so this is where you'll see like the passive aggressive behavior, the withdrawing, that they just don't answer your emails anymore, right? It might be because we're being too Pingala or we're too controlling. So in that case, if you're the one feeling that this person is pulling on you too much, right? Instead of withdrawing or going silent, you might need to just draw a boundary and say, hey, wait a minute, this is too much, right? You speak up, get your feet underneath you and kind of push back so that they're not pulling on you, right? And also, as if you're the Pingala person who's being too controlling, well, you know what to do. You already know what to do. And let's let go a little bit of that control. So what I'd like to do, so first of all, anything else that doesn't make sense to you, because I'm going to lead you in just a short exercise and then a yoga nidra.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
So what about, you've talked about extremes of leaning in and pushing either way, but what about when there's sort of an absence? Like neither one, they're not engaging.
Yeah.
Whether or not it's too Ida or too Pingala, whatever, people are not engaging with each other. That relationship just doesn't seem to be moving.
Okay. So what it could be, and I'm not there, obviously there's more than just Ida and Pingala dynamics in a relationship. So what it could be from the Ida and Pingala point of view is that if you have two Idas in a relationship, the tendency will be for everything to get stuck because, well, where do you want to go for dinner? Well, I don't know. Where do you want to go for dinner? Well, I don't know. Where do you want to go for dinner? And because neither one speaks up and really says what's going on, there's no movement, right? So because both things are suppressed, because I want to keep the peace, because I don't want to say, because I don't want to bring out what's inside of me, it stays the same, right? because one doesn't want to take control. So for any movement to happen in the energy field of this world, there's got to be the Ida Pingala opposition for the movement to happen. Right? Now, you could also have two Pingalas where there's no movement, because now you've got, well, we're going to do it my way. No, we're going to do it my way. No, we're going to do it my way. We're going to do it my way. And you're both still stuck, right? But now like this instead of like this. So either way, so if you're stuck like this and you want movement, somebody's got to consciously move to the Ida position. And if you're a Pingala, you're going to feel like, well, that's losing. But it's not losing, because the only way the relationship is going to move is when somebody's willing to take the receptive side in order for things to start moving again, right? So it could go either way. And somebody was asking here about codependency. Is it all Ida or a dance of both? This is a really good question. I think it's a dance of both. And I think you could kind of see it in the first picture. So codependency in my mind is when one person is leaning on the other, right, so much, and this leaning happens so much that I actually lose my own footing. I lose my sense of self. I lose who I am until all my body weight is leaning on this person. So that if that person were to go away, I would collapse. I would just face plant, right? But it doesn't happen all by itself. This person probably gets their sense of self from you leaning on them, right? So they feel important. They feel wanted. The more you lean on who they are, the more they may tell you what to do, right? So this codependency is like, well, I rely on you for this and you rely on me for that. But it creates, obviously it's unhealthy, but it's co-created is what I'm trying to say. And this dynamic can also create the environment for abusive relationships, right? Because one has given up themselves so totally, and the other only feels loved when the other has completely given themselves up. So this person over here, the one who is the Pingala, feels loved when this person, only when this person is leaning on them completely, when they've given up themselves completely. So this is also where this abuser-abusee relationship can kind of take place, right? So that's one of them. So another question came up is, what about a relationship where one person withdraws from communicating? How do you get them to interact? Should they be left alone? This is a really good question. Withdrawing from communicating is an Ida pattern, right? It probably has an element of, it could have an element of passive aggressive to it, or just a discomfort with saying what's going on inside. Keep in mind that these patterns have been developed over days, months, weeks, or years, right? So I can't tell you exactly what the answer is, but I can tell you what to experiment with, right? And I think it would, the last part of the question is, how do you get them to interact? Should they be left alone? And my answer would be, if you have been trying to get them to talk to you and kind of pulling on them, what's happening is you're pulling on them and they're pulling away. So what could be helpful is that you just kind of come back into yourself and hold your space, continue on with your life and doing your thing, and see if that helps them come towards you. Now, the moment they come towards you, don't jump on them. All right? It's kind of like a scared cat that they kind of like creep their way back to you, and you don't want to jump onto them, but just, you know, if they happen to want to share something with you, then you let them, right? But don't jump on it and try to go really deep. Just take it for what it is. And maybe just let them share what they have to share and then say nothing, right? So you're letting it come into a place, especially if you've had a pattern long term, it's been like this, that you're kind of going after them to talk to you, that they need to feel like, okay, it's safe for me to have my own space. I don't have to share everything. And I can share what I want to share, and I don't have to overshare. But of course, understand that I don't know all the background, so please take this and then filter it through what you know about your relationship. But if that fits, it's something to experiment with. These are just energies, and just do a little and see how that works when you just pull back a little and just give them their space and notice what the tendency is and what happens. See how it works for you. Okay. All right. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to lead you through a short yoga nidra. And yoga nidra is a sleep-based meditation technique. You can do it sitting or lying down. I've developed this yoga nidra. The one I'm going to lead you in can be done sitting, but it will be more effective if you can lie down or find a couch or, just put your chair back, be comfortable. And it's good in a number of ways. First, one of the techniques I'm going to be leading you in is called alternate nostril breathing. So you're going to be imagining that you're breathing in through your right nostril and then exhaling through your left, and then imagining that you're inhaling through the left and exhaling through the right. And what this does is it actually balances your Ida and Pingala, your inner masculine and feminine. Since we've been talking about it tonight, I thought it would be a good breathing technique for us to do. So you will not be actually closing off your nostrils. You won't be doing anything. You'll just be imagining that you're breathing in through one and exhaling through the other, all right? And also when you breathe in, I will invite you to into the third eye. Third eye point between the eyebrow, and it's the place where the wave and the ocean meet. Where, remember we had the picture of the Sushumna and the energies coming together. Well, when they come together, that's at the third eye, where the Ida and Pingala come together, and these energies in unification, yin-yang unification, meet the whole. All right, so I'll have you bring your attention there a few times. And we are going to use an intention, right? So I'd like you to just think about, before we go into this nidra, a pattern that you see yourself in, and you don't have to go into the whole pattern, but just think about, how do I want to be in this situation? So just close your eyes right now. And just think about, how do I want to be in this particular situation? With my understanding of Ida and Pingala, how do I want to be? And then this is going to be your intention for the nidra. And so as I guide you through the nidra, I'll be asking you to bring this intention into your awareness. Right? So just getting yourself comfortable. And then close your eyes and quiet your mind. Be still. Let go of all thoughts, worry, and tension. I'll breathe in fully and exhale with a deep sigh. And again, breathe in and let go even more. And feel a deep sense of contentment and peace begin to wash over you. And now just gently bringing your intention into your awareness, seeing, feeling, or sensing how you want to be with this person or situation. Taking this intention into the Yoga Nidra. And now we're going to tense and relax the body. If you cannot have undue pressure in the head for any reason, it's important that you breathe normally as you do this technique. So just tighten and tense the whole body, the feet, the legs, the buttocks, the face. Make fists, scrunch up your face, tighten, tighten, tighten even more. And let go. And on your next exhalation, let go even more. We'll repeat this one more time. Inhale, tighten the feet, the legs, the buttocks, the hips, the arms, the face. Make fists tighten, tighten, scrunch up the face even more. Open the mouth and let go. And on your next exhalation, let go even more. And feel yourself descending down into the stillness beneath the mind. All excess tension and holding carried out with each exhaling breath. Feel your outward attention moving inward. Now simply become aware of the rising and falling of the breath. Become aware of your natural breath pattern without trying to control or change it. Just watch and observe the movement. You may find the breath to be fast or slow, deep or shallow. Whatever is happening, simply relax and witness the breath. Now bring your attention to the flow of your breath, specifically the breath as it naturally moves through the nostrils. See the breath as two separate streams, rising and falling. Now begin to visualize breathing through alternate nostrils. On your next inhalation, breathe in through the right nostril and exhale through the left nostril, emptying the lungs completely. Inhale through the left nostril and exhale through the right nostril. Continue in this way, inhaling right, exhaling left, inhaling left, exhaling right. Continue on your own. And on your next inhalation, breathe in through the right nostril and hold your attention at the top of the inhalation before exhaling through the left nostril. Each time you inhale, pause momentarily at the third eye, brow center, before exhaling through the opposite nostril, emptying the lungs completely. Inhale, right nostril, hold at the third eye. Exhale, left nostril. Now breathe normally, simply witnessing the breath flowing equally through both nostrils. Breath breathing itself. Right and left brain, Ida and Pingala, restored to harmony and balanced. Allow attention to naturally rest at the third eye, brow center, unified and whole. Rest in a place of total quiet, a place where you can just be. Now bring your attention to the whole body. From the top of the head to the tips of the toes. Whole body. Now sense the space around the right side of the body. Sense the space as it touches the skin boundary on the right side of the body. Sense the space on the left side of the body. Sense the space as it touches the skin boundary on the left side of the body. Now sense the space as it touches the entire skin boundary. Experience the entirety of the body simultaneously and equally. Whole body breathing into the space. Whole body breathing out of the space. Now bring your center attention to the center between your eyebrows and give yourself permission to enter the deepest level of relaxation right now. Let go. Empty of all doing, all past, all future. merge into this space and be empty. Here, your intentions and affirmations are actualized and fulfilled with effortless ease. Now see, sense, or feel how you want to be with this person or situation. Bring it into your whole body, your vision. Feel this intention becoming a part of your inner blueprint. Your intention is now being assimilated and adopted by all levels of your body and being. All channels are open. Life force is flowing freely, healing the body, calming the mind. Open your heart and feel content. If there is a family member, life situation, or relationship that needs resolution, let your attention go there now. Surround it with the light of your neutral awareness. Allow yourself to open to the situation in a new way. And now begin to become aware of the rising and falling of the breath. Feeling yourself beginning to come back to your body, to the breath. Gradually deepening the breath. And continue to stay connected to that silent place as you come back into the body. Bring your intention into your awareness once again. Change nothing. Every time you find yourself in reaction, you are empowered to replace it with your intention. And then as you're ready, you can just bring yourself back to awareness. If you'd like to stay here and just rest, you're welcome to. Know that you can easily come back here again and again. Know that your intention has been received from a place beyond your mind. Every cell of your body has received this intention, and it's being acted upon without your having to do anything about it. And as you're ready, you can open your eyes. So thank you all for being here tonight. If you're still resting, that's fine. You can listen in a reclined position. Reba and Jenny, I want to thank you for having me.
Oh, Kamini, thank you so much. It was just beautiful. I'm in a happy, glowy haze right now, so I can't put words together. Jenny.
Good. I'm so glad.
You explained a lot of relationships in my life. So, thank you for that. And it's interesting to see too how like intuitively maybe you try to take the other side.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so yeah, it was just very beautiful. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome. And I hope that it's like a map. And we do it intuitively, but we just kind of go too much the other way. And so it just helps to kind of have a little picture in your head.
Yeah, that was beautiful. Thank
Good.
you so much.
My
and
pleasure.
I definitely want to encourage everyone to visit the sanctuary shop and to see your offerings. I'm going to be checking that out too. So thank you so much. Browse through all the healers' offerings, products, and services, and they're all discounted to members. So definitely, grab this opportunity to work with Kamini too. If you wish to support what we're creating here, you can tell your friends that our charter membership gets you this goodness for like less than $1 a day. I think that actually Reba wanted to introduce your next workshop. So I will.
Thank you, Jenny. I'll just a quick interjection because this is pretty new. I want to invite everybody to head over to the AtoZ Academy. It's quite in the future, but it's something to keep in mind. In April of 2018, Kamini's going to be doing a 3-week training called the Art of Presence. So I think after you've experienced this, I think you can know that it's going to be quite wonderful. And just head over to the Academy to learn a little bit more about that. Okay. Thank you, Jenny. I want to hand it back over to you now.
Sure. And our next Circle Space workshop will be on Wednesday, July 12th, 12 to 1:30 p.m. Eastern. It's The Many Ways Our Womb Speaks to You with Lisa Marie Goodson. And as always, the Circle Space Workshop is free to AtoZ members. And also free to members is the new monthly Art Spirit Workshop with Cassie Gregory, which starts July 17th. And our next Distance Healing with me is July 10th. And our next women's group, led by Joni Advent Mayer, is July 11th. So we have a lot of goodness. And we are so blessed to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's so pleasure to be with you, and you know where you can always find me online if you have further questions or need further resources. And I'm going to say that there are the two MP3s that are available on the AtoZ site are not yet released Yoga Nidras. So if you want something new, go check out the website. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. It's so exciting. Unreleased recordings in our show.
Yes. Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you very much.
Bye. You can all unmute and say bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye, all.